Most people wouldn't understand. To make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs.
What is the scariest episode of television of all time? Well, that depends who you ask. 50 years ago, you might have said Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the iconic episode from the 5th season of the original Twilight Zone series. It's been remade and reinterpreted twice already, to varying degrees of success. The premise is fantastic. A man afraid of flying on the verge of a nervous breakdown notices a gremlin on the wing of his plane. The episode remains an entertaining viewing experience with a great central performance by William Shatner, though by today's standards, the creature effects date it a little too heavily for it to be labelled scariest. Many people point to more recent TV episodes like The Bent Neck Lady from Haunting of Hill House. In terms of pure suspense, Hill House and Mike Flanagan's other Netflix projects remain consistently effective. Flanagan has built a reputation as a master of horror pacing, perfecting his brand of slow ramping tension and its eventual release. Though universally speaking, ghosts don't scare everybody, nor do the supernatural creatures featured in the iconic 10th episode of Buffy's 4th season, the Hush episode. I'm sure you've seen their image floating online. The creature design and prosthetics resulted in an unforgettable embodiment of a twisted fairy tale, one that was brought to life in part by the endlessly talented man behind the monster, Doug Jones. The episode is one of Buffy's best, and the alien movements and plastered smiles of the gentleman are a delight to behold. But again, I think scarier things are out there. Ironically, it's a series best known for its ventures into the supernatural that would produce maybe the most human terror.
Remember the house your parents warned you to stay away from? This Friday.
Oh my God.
You'll understand why.
In 1996, Fox aired an episode of television that became so infamous it would be banned from re-release for the next 3 years. To this day, I think the scariest episode of television remains the second episode of The X-Files' 4th season, Home. The X-Files aired in 1993, the brainchild of television producer Chris Carter. Carter was inspired to write a conspiracy-focused series as a fan of Kolchak, the Night Stalker, and after reading a report that cited an overwhelming 3.7 million Americans believed that they may have been abducted by aliens in their lifetime. Like many, he recognized a growing sentiment of distrust in the government, partly a result of the 1972 Watergate scandal.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Carter was a fan of Jonathan Demme's adaptation of The Silence of the Lambs and felt that centering a series around the FBI would lend plausibility to a case of the week series structure, as opposed to Kolchak, which focused on a service reporter investigating mysterious crimes, similarly supernatural in nature. After an initial pitch to Fox failed to get the show greenlit, Carter fleshed out his concept and returned for a second attempt.
I think that it was so unlike anything else on television, they really didn't know what to make of it.
The sci-fi genre on television was experiencing a historically turbulent period, and Fox's recent attempts to break through to a mainstream audience hadn't resulted in the success that they had hoped for. But Carter's idea was strong, and his lead protagonists were even stronger. The duo he created in Mulder and Scully represented opposing views towards the supernatural. Mulder the believer, and Scully the skeptic.
2 FBI agents assigned to the same cases for different reasons.
The X-Files premiered on September 10th, 1993, to modest ratings and viewership, but positive word of mouth spread fast, as did audience investment in the 2 leads and their unique chemistry.
Thank you.
3 decades later, The X-Files boasts a combined total of 9 original seasons, 2 single-season revival series, and 2 feature films. The original series ran for 202 episodes, with the first 5 seasons widely considered the strongest and the most consistent. These seasons predominantly followed the Monster of the Week structure, which was a big reason why audiences kept tuning in. The formula allowed each episode to stand on its own and highlight a unique monstrosity dreamt up by the show's writing department. Eugene Toombs, a mutant with the ability to stretch his body and squeeze into tight spaces. The Fluke Man, a truly horrific sewer-dwelling creature mutated into being by the Chernobyl disaster. The Great Mutado, a Frankenstein-style monster unveiled in a rare black and white episode of the show, itself intended as a direct homage to the 1931 Frankenstein adaptation. But it's the monsters with no ties to the supernatural that prove to be some of the most terrifying. The inbred family of feral humans who made their debut in the season 4 episode Home. The episode is set in the town of, well, Home, in Pennsylvania, and was the first episode of the series to feature a viewer discretion warning for graphic content. It opens on a woman giving birth to a deformed baby which is buried alive by 3 disfigured men near their home. The next day, children playing baseball nearby discover the remains of the infant, drawing Mulder and Scully to the typically idyllic small town. The local sheriff explains that the dilapidated house nearby belongs to 3 brothers, the remnants of the Peacock family. They've been inbreeding since the Civil War and have access to neither electricity nor running water. The sheriff is hesitant to spark controversy in the small town, which he describes as being so quiet and so peaceful that residents don't even feel the need to lock their doors at night. After performing an autopsy on the infant, Mulder and Scully determine that not only was it murdered, but that its deformities were a cause of inbreeding. They suspect that the Peacock brothers kidnapped and raped a woman and break into their home to investigate. There they discover blood, scissors, and a shovel, enough to confirm their suspicions. That night, the family use a stolen vehicle to drive to the sheriff's house, where the sheriff and his wife are getting ready for bed, front door unlocked. The Peacock brothers let themselves in and brutally bludgeon the sheriff and his wife to death. Their corpses are discovered the next day by the deputy, who then leads Mulder and Scully to the Peacock family home, pistol at the ready. Once there, the deputy attempts to break into the house and is swiftly decapitated by a booby trap, his body ripped apart by the brothers. Mulder and Scully release the family's pigs as a distraction, then sneak into the house to search it. Inside, they discover a screaming woman hidden under a bed, at first believing her to be the victim of the Peacocks. They quickly realize that she is in fact their mother, thought to have been killed in a car accident years prior. The brothers catch on to the FBI agents in their home and return to confront them. They take multiple bullets before the youngest 2 are killed, one with a headshot and the other being impaled on his own trap. Mulder and Scully are unable to find the mother and eldest son, Edmund, who escaped in the chaos. The episode ends with a shot of the stolen Cadillac, Edmund and Mrs. Peacock wasting no time making plans for a new family, then driving off to find a life somewhere new, a brand new home. I think the brutality of this episode is still shocking by today's standards. Opening the story with a case of infanticide alone was enough to make the Fox network's standards and practices department squirm.
And the baby's crying, and we covered it with dirt, and it was really a horrifying opening act. So horrifying that standards and practices said, oh, no, the baby can't make a sound. It's dead from the get-go.
Chris Carter and director Kim Manners managed to skirt the boundaries of censorship by relying on implied violence as opposed to outright showing everything.
What is unseen, what is imagined, what is intimated is always scarier than really what appears on screen.
This was common for the show during its run, consistently pushing the envelope of what could be shown on network TV without violating any of the FCC's policies. No nudity, no profanity, and no explicit violence. Still, the scene in which the Peacocks beat the sheriff and his wife to death gets about as close to explicit as the shower scene in Psycho. The weapon may not connect, but the editing and sound design sell the violence. And then there's the incest. The representation of generational inbreeding was uniquely transgressive for television, previously reserved for exploitation horror stories like Tobe Hooper's original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The episode was inspired by Hooper's 1974 classic in a few ways: its rural setting, the production design of the Peacock family home, and the isolated, degenerate family themselves. Though the Peacocks present as nothing more than feral cavemen, it's the way that they're framed, mostly in clever silhouettes, that keeps them intimidating. At least until the end of the episode. The repeated use of Wonderful Wonderful by Johnny Mathis provides a creepy juxtaposition with the visuals and reminds us of the vintage family lineage. It no doubt inspired forthcoming TV shows like American Horror Story or the Insidious films in its use of an upbeat, nostalgic track contrasted against horrifying imagery. As the Johnny Mathis song plays from the vintage Cadillac radio over the implied image of gross maternal familiarity, I could see why the episode was controversial.
In the final scene, the acceptable answer of what Mom and Edgar are doing in the trunk would be that she's comforting him and inspiring him to go off and start a new family. And if you think of anything else they might be doing in the trunk, that's up to you.
Of course, some of it has been dulled over time. The series originally aired in standard definition, and certain effects lend themselves more to that original format than the rescanned 1080p you'd find on Blu-ray or streaming. The makeup doesn't always hold up under scrutiny, particularly in broad daylight, and I couldn't help staring at Mother Peacock's shifting false teeth during her close-up. That said, her reveal from beneath the bed as a quadruple amputee genuinely shocked me. At that point, the implied origin of the deformed infant is worse than anything they could show us.
There was a biography of Charlie Chaplin that we read, and he was in a small town, and he was staying with his family. And one night they said, Charlie, we like you a lot, and we want to show you something that we've never shown anyone. And from under the cot, they pulled out this teenager who was only a torso and a head, with no arms, no legs. They started singing and clapping, and this torso started dancing around. And Chaplin was horrified, but we found that story just horrifying and interesting and weird, and we always wanted to put it in the show.
Karen Knoble delivers a standout performance beneath layers of makeup and without the use of her limbs, relying on her expressive eyes and vocal fry to convey it all. She'd go on to lend her expertise to a transformative role of a different kind, providing the motion capture performance for the gentle orangutan Maurice in the Planet of the Apes movies. Though the open-ended conclusion of the Peacock family was never resolved in later episodes of The X-Files, Knoble returned for dual roles in the season 11 episode +1, in which she played both Judy and Chucky Poundstone, and transformed herself once again. When Home debuted on Fox, almost 19 million viewers in the US watched along, a Nielsen rating of 11.9. That means roughly 11.9% of all households that owned a television were tuned in. Due to an overwhelming number of complaints, reportedly one of the highest counts in the network's history, the episode was banned from rebroadcast for 3 years.
There's some sort of a badge, some sort of rewarding experience to think that I directed a show that they banned from television. It's like living in a third world country, We're banned in Budapest, Home was banned in the US.
The excessive violence was cited as a primary reason, despite most of it occurring off-screen. Of course, like most artifacts that were banned from public consumption, its popularity only grew as a result. It became one of the most highly requested episodes, and something of a cult classic on VHS releases and box sets. 3 years later, the threshold for what was acceptable to show on television had changed, dramatically. What had seemed shocking in 1996 was now something of the norm, particularly on cable. FX had acquired syndication rights for The X-Files and promoted the episode heavily as part of a Halloween Uncensored event, now with not one, but 2 viewer discretion warnings. In the end, the episode's trajectory from backlash to banning and eventual reappraisal fittingly mimicked that of Texas Chainsaw.
We are a part of the film, bound to the negative like soul to flesh.
I'm sure if you scoured the history of television, you could find horrific episodes with more violence, more tension, and maybe more scares than Season 4, Episode 2 of The X-Files. Of course, it's as subjective as trying to pinpoint the scariest movie of all time. A topic for another day, maybe. For my money, the consistent feeling of dread that hangs throughout the 40-minute episode is unmatched. Like the best of the horror genre, it leaves you with a pit in your stomach and keeps you questioning. Are people really capable of this? And why can't I look away? It gives you all the information you need while leaving enough to the imagination to keep you wanting more. The combination of truly transgressive ideas, infant death, incest, sexual violence, are more akin to something you'd see on TV nowadays, with the concept of censorship being as flexible as the release schedules of streaming shows. For 1996, and still to this day, I would say the scariest episode of television remains Home.